If you're going to succeed in the nonprofit world, you need a good board, a good working board, not just a board, a good working board. So that's key. Anybody out there listen, if you don't understand nothing else, I hear nothing else I'm saying today, understand this. In order for you to succeed, you need a working board who will have your best interest and the organization's best interest in mind.
Public Health Matters, Small Business Navigator Program, brought to you by the Illinois Public Health Association, with grant support from the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. Welcome to part 2 of a conversation as part of this program with our guest, Lynard Joiner. And today we're going to be talking about the other project that he started, which is his not-for-profit organization, Shifting into New Gear, or SING. And actually, Mr. Joiner, this is how you and I reconnected.
Yes.
After you got out of prison and you started this program, this not-for-profit corporation, not-for-profit organization, Shifting into New Gear. As part of that, you reached out to the governor's office because you wanted to let the governor's office know about this program that you had created here in Springfield to help people successfully transition from prison back into community and family life. And you were being very, very successful with it. And you were surprised when you reached out to the governor's office when I was the one that called you back.
Yes.
Because at that time I was the governor's, in the previous administration, the director of public safety policy. And so we got reconnected.
Yes.
And we sat down and had a conversation in the governor's office. I had the director of the Illinois Department of Corrections with me.
Mm-hmm.
And you had a couple of people with you.
Yes.
Who were one from the county
mm-hmm.
and one from the city.
Yes.
Both dealing with community services and community resources.
Yes.
To help you, you had 2 people who were with you who were members of your board, of your organization. And we're going to talk about that. But they came with you. And that automatically added credibility to you. And credibility is everything when you're trying to get a not-for-profit organization going and get funding for it. But to do that, you needed resources. You needed a program. You needed credibility. So you set about to establish a not-for-profit organization. Tell us about that. How did that unfold? What resources did you turn to? How did you figure out how to do that? And what did you have to do to get it off the ground?
Well, as I said in the last show, I went back to SBA again.
The Small Business Administration?
Yes, Small Business Administrator again, and shared this idea with them. I also showed them an article that led me into this, along with my experience when I got out, because there was no service, no SING program, like you said, that would help individuals to really readjust back to society. So when I went to small business, I showed them the little business plan thing. I had to have a business plan. Even though there was no money involved, it still had to be a layout of the plan and the service that would be offered. Then you have to go take your plan down to I had to go to Secretary of State, and I had to register this business. I had to pay. There is a fee you must pay. Then I had to find an attorney.
Now that's registering as a not-for-profit
Yes.
corporation.
Yes. You have to do that.
Not-for-profit.
Yes.
You register with the Secretary of State.
Secretary of State.
The registration is not all that difficult, but there are some requirements.
No. Yes. But
now, by the way,
go ahead.
One of the things I want people who are listening to this to know, if you go to this, if you were to get on and do an internet search for how to start a not-for-profit in Illinois, one of the things you'd come up with is this guide for starting not-for-profit corporations, which is put out by the Illinois Secretary of State's office. And this is a really good publication.
I did look.
It's kind of a cookbook. And there are a lot of other resources out there.
I did have to use that. I did say I went on the internet and searched a lot of this before I went to the Secretary of State, so I wouldn't be completely lost on what they're saying. But once I went down there, paid the filing fee and this and that. But there was one thing I didn't know. I didn't know it just couldn't be me. I thought it was just me. No, it don't work like that. I had to make sure I had at least 3 individuals. So I was like, what do you mean? I said, it's my program. No, it's not your program. It's an organization you're trying to start. You still got a long way to go, young man, he told me.
Now, let me interject there.
Yes.
This is the lawyer in me. Okay?
Yes, go ahead. Yes. We want to make sure they understand what we're saying.
Yeah, because this is an important point that you're
Yes.
raising here. When you start a business, it's your business.
Exactly.
When you start a not-for-profit corporation, it's not your business.
No.
Because the reason that it is tax exempt by the IRS, when you jump through the hoops and get that designation, which kind of getting ahead of ourselves, when we talk about a 501c3 organization, it's a tax exempt charitable organization. It's serving a public purpose. It's in essence a public entity.
Yes.
It's not your business. And so one of the things is you have to have a board of directors. And you can be a member of the board. You can be one of the 3 that are required as a minimum. But if you're a member of the board and you receive donations or grant money, as a member of the board, as a general rule and as a good practice, you don't get that money.
No.
So the board, it's not that they own the not-for-profit corporation. Nobody, I guess, is the owner as such, but they run the business side of it. They manage it. And what you wanted to do was to have the funding so that you could afford to invest the time to deliver the services that you wanted to do as Sing, as shifting into new gear. So you had to have a board of directors. Now, that board of directors is required legally, and the board hires you. Could hire somebody else. So it's kind of scary, isn't it?
Yes.
But they, of course, would hire you as the executive director or the chief executive officer of this entity, this not-for-profit corporation. And then the board receives money, donations, grant money. They manage the money. They manage the business end. They raise the money. They're doing that or should be doing all those things. And that then they hire you and pay you to deliver the services to the people you're trying to serve.
Exactly.
That's the model.
Yes.
It doesn't always work easily, does it? Now, the board also does another thing. I mean, you face biases because of your prison background that people have to know before they're going to donate to this organization, that just like with me when I first heard about it. Is this for real? Is this guy for real? Well, you are for real. But you came with people that would vouch for you.
Yes.
That knew you, they'd been involved with you, they were members of your board. That's the other function that the board does in a not-for-profit corporation. It gives it skills, people who have skills. I mean, it'd be ideal to have if you had a lawyer, an accountant, somebody that was had the experience writing grants and managing grant funds. Perfect board, Yes. It doesn't always work that way.
No.
But you have people who have skills that they can contribute as volunteers. They don't get paid for it. They believe in your organization, but they also can vouch for you.
Yes.
They're members of the community. They have credibility. They're willing to work, and they offer their credibility. So you've got this board that you work with. That's very different than the business that you were talking about.
Very different.
Yeah. But you did develop a board, but then you ran into some problems, and typical of these sorts of organizations, as things unfolded. The board was more a board in name than in function.
Yes.
And you needed a working board.
Yes. That's a difference. It's a difference between having a board and a working board. The difference is here. Board member are individual who willing to serve on your board. Just not saying that individuals do this, but it's something to think about. Some individuals just want to be a part of an organization, so they sit on your board. But a working board is individual who willing to go out, do fundraiser, to just do the thing that need to be done while you as the CEO or whatever running the service, providing the service. Because you can't do both. You can't do everything yourself.
You tried to.
Because you get in trouble that way, though. You run into trouble. I have realized that you run into trouble because you have what we call, this is something that we might want to point out, because you have what we call bylaws and Constitution. You have things that you have to uphold. As far as that 501c3, you talk about that. A lot of people think that's something that you automatically get. No, you have to do paperwork to get that 501c3. It's best when you get a lawyer to do it for you. I had a lawyer to do it for Sing. So people were telling me it was going to take anywhere between 6 months to a year. We got blessed, as I would say. Within 3 months after we applied for it, we had it. So we got blessed that way.
That's important because
Yes.
people think if they're just going to get started, you need to get started early on getting everything in place. Now, bylaws.
Yes.
What do bylaws look like? Okay, well, you can go to organizations here again. Mm-hmm. For example, there's if you get online, do a search. There's a National Council of Nonprofits. There are other organizations, and they have samples of bylaws. Yes. And you can look at those, and you can see, okay, these are examples, and you can pick and choose and put together something that fits your organization.
Correct.
And there's certain minimum requirements that the IRS requires that the Secretary of State doesn't require, but the IRS requires.
Yes.
So you need to incorporate those into your bylaws.
Yes.
I also, just this morning, I did an internet search where I looked for how to start a nonprofit in Illinois. Mm-hmm. Lo and behold, there's YouTube videos, and there's one by that name.
Yes.
And so you can find out what are the steps that you need to follow.
Correct.
And there are resources to figure out, okay, how do I follow those steps? But the main thing we want people to understand who are listening isn't the steps themselves. We could get into more detail in that in some other conversation. As much as there are resources available to help you follow the steps, know what they are, and to follow them. But this is something that's different than a business. You've got a board of directors. If you're going to be able to get money, receive money to support the services you want to deliver, then you have to have a board that hires you to do that and pays you, and ideally, as things grow, a staff. And that's what you're going through with Sing, is trying to get the funding through the board and then get paid for your time by the board, and in time expand so that you have a staff that can help deliver the services that Shifting into New Gear was created to deliver, not just in the people that have by word of mouth connection with you, but to expand the scope to more people that are returning to Springfield, but also other communities in this area. And as things expand, you need staff. To have staff, you need funding. To get funding, you need to be a not-for-profit corporation, and you need to have a board.
Yes. So, one of the bigger key to having a successful nonprofit business that I have learned is patience. It takes patience. But I mean, reason it takes patience because it don't happen overnight. It don't happen overnight, and it's nonprofit, so that means no money. It's a step-by-step thing to grow the business. But you're only going to get out of what you put into it. It's just like anything else. Whatever you put into it, that's what you're going to get out of. One of the bigger challenge for me is dealing with Sing is my first 3-4 years. I pretty much tried to do it all myself and come and find out, even though it was a success because I had a real true heart for it, but I come and find out that, no, you need to back up and revisit this and relook at it and make sure you following your bylaw, make sure you understand the step that must be taken by your board and all. So it's a challenge. It's totally different from a business. You know, a business you can sort of play with it a little bit, but with the nonprofit, you definitely have to follow it because you'll find yourself in trouble. Yes.
Well, speaking of trouble, one of the things you have to do with a not-for-profit corporation that's different than a business. With a business, the business bank account is your money to use and write checks, and you can pay for expenses, but you can also pay yourself.
Yes.
As the business owner.
Yes.
A not-for-profit, you can't do that.
No.
If you do that, then that's where the trouble.
Yes.
That's big trouble.
That's big trouble.
So what you have to do with the not-for-profit, you have to have a separate bank account.
Yes.
For the not-for-profit, and the money has to be managed by the board.
Exactly.
Not you.
Exactly.
And you have to separate so that the people who are, you as the person, if you're an employee of the board, as the CEO, the chief executive officer, you can't write yourself a check.
No.
You can't go and make a withdrawal to pay yourself. The board has to write the check. They manage the books. One of the officers of the board should be a treasurer, and they may hire a bookkeeper or have a bookkeeping service. It's not a bad idea as things get going. But then the bottom line is you receive a check. You don't write yourself a check.
No, you receive it.
And these are the checks and balances.
Yes.
The controls.
Yes.
That are important not only for credibility for donors, but also legally.
Yes.
Because if you don't follow the rules, the IRS will revoke your status as a 501c3 charitable organization. And now everything starts to come unraveled. And donors, in worst case scenarios, some people have ended up becoming prosecuted.
Yes.
And convicted.
Yes.
Of using the charitable organization they established basically as a con or as a personal piggy bank.
You know, one of the things that I ran into was that, you know, this is interesting. I got to share this. I got out of prison in 2011 in November. A month later, so I appeared in the paper because I had went out there to speaking engagement, telling people what I wanted to, how I wanted to start this nonprofit business and this and that, and how going to prison saved my life. You know, in the SJR, when they run an article on you, people can make comment on it. You know, so one of the comment was about me was, oh, here we go again, blah, blah, blah. Here go another dude coming out of prison talking about his life been changed. He wants to do all this and that, and he wants to help people and all this and that. Just another scam and stuff. So there was a lot of negative articles against me. I was reading them, you know. Did it hurt me? Yes. I must be honest. It hurt me to read that people already passed judgment on me, you know, based on my background.
And here you are trying to do something good.
I am trying to do the right thing, something good. But at the same time, I had to say, okay, it's there up in. Only thing I can do is continue to do the right thing and let it show. Do
the right thing in the right way.
Exactly. So.
Or it'll turn out wrong.
So, yes, 2 years later, I hear from this individual one of the individuals that wrote this article about me, about I was a scam, another con. She said, you know what, Mr. Joiner, I owe you an apology. You are real, you are sincere. What can I do to help you? So it's just a matter of you staying consistent, believing, doing the right thing in the right way, as you said, that's very key. especially when you're dealing with nonprofit, it's exactly what it is. A nonprofit, okay, if you find a way that you can get paid legit, good. But go into that business with the mindset, nonprofit. Anything else happen for you, become a blessing as far as I'm concerned. But they said nonprofit what it is. Like with me, one of the biggest challenge of a nonprofit organization for me is this. I gotta go back to this, a board, and knowing that board care for you. That what going to help you. If you can find the right board, and that board show you, hey, we here for you. You might not always like what your board's saying to you. You might even have a disagreement with what they saying to you because you saying, hey, I'm the one doing the work. Why not? No, they are protecting you. They try and make sure you're safe, make sure you're doing the right thing and providing the right service. That's a good board for you. And you need a good board. If you're going to succeed in the nonprofit world, you need a good board, a good working board, not just a board, a good working board. So that's key. Anybody out there listen, if you don't understand nothing else, I hear nothing else I'm saying today, understand this. In order for you to succeed, you need a working board who will have your best interest and the organization's best interest in mind.
Well, you've touched on two, probably the most key elements here. The working board, which is different than a business, starting a small business, and the fact that you're doing this out of heart more than a profit motive, because there may not be any profit for you personally in this, at least for some time. It's going to be run on heart and hard work, and that's what you've done with shifting into new gear.
Thank you.
Now, hopefully you're moving into a new phase of things.
Yes.
And going to be able to receive and are receiving a degree of grant money.
Yes.
But there's still more need than there is money.
Exactly.
Thank goodness you've got your small business that you're running also to help pay the bills.
Yeah.
But if somebody thinks they're going to start a not-for-profit corporation as the means that they're going to pay their bills, well, that may not be a good business plan.
No, not at all.
Well, bless you for the work that you're doing with Sing.
Thank
I would not be a member of your board if I didn't believe in you and the mission of Sing and what you're doing.
Thank you.
Well, hopefully that gives people who are listening at least an overview, an idea of what's involved in starting not only a small business, but also, for some, a not-for-profit corporation. And we're going to go into a little more detail and on some of these aspects, because one of the things you're learning with shifting into new gear is some certifications that you need to be eligible to receive grant money. And neither you or I knew anything about that until recently.
Yes.
So we'll have someone come in to provide a little more insight in that.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Joiner.
Thanks for having me.
It's been an honor and a privilege having you with us.
Same here. Thank you.
Well, now joining us is Lisa Clement-Stott, who is a business consultant, and she's worked with Mr. Joiner, as we made reference to at the end of the conversation that he and I had, on getting some certifications that are needed for him to qualify for some grants. Lisa, will you tell us about that?
So Lynard has had his nonprofit set up for several years, and it's all set up correctly, but there's an additional layer that you have to do in order to be eligible to receive state and federal grants. So the state of Illinois actually requires you to be registered with the federal government first. So the first step is to register at sam.gov. That's S-A-M, like Uncle Sam, SAM.gov. And so you go through the process there and you get registered with the federal government. And then when you get your registration completed there, then there's an identifying number that you have for that. Then you go into the state's grant accountability portal. And that acronym is GATA. I forget what the T. Transparency is probably what the T stands for. So it's GATA, so the GATA portal. and you apply there as well. So once you are registered in both the SAM.gov and the GATA system, you are eligible to go through the list of grant opportunities that all the state agencies have and see what you're eligible for and apply and potentially win those.
Now, I will tell you, I'm a member of Lynard Joiner's board, of the SING board. I did not know that.
I don't think a lot of nonprofits think about going after state and federal grants. I think that a lot of nonprofits are very homegrown. It's a person with a vision, with an idea how to better their community. And the work is what people lead with. Like Lynard knew, based on his experience, that he had a strategy to help people develop a great life after prison and to be hooked into the community and to get work and to, be a fully fledged member. He had that vision. The funding part, you need it, and that's why you started a nonprofit, because you want other people to be able to give to the work, but it's not the thing that you lead with when you found a nonprofit. So I do think that a lot of nonprofits don't even think about state or federal grants. Certainly, some nonprofits are they're in the space where a lot of government funds are, urban agriculture or recidivism, social justice, electric vehicles. I mean, these are areas where there is funding. And then there are some nonprofits that you're not going to be getting any funding probably from the state or the federal government. But you should definitely go online and look to see what's available if you're running a nonprofit, and then if there are grant options that seem to fit the work you're doing, then you can go through the process of getting registered.
So when you go online, where do you go to look?
So for the state, we'll have to add these links later.
We will add links to what we're talking about here for those of you who are watching on the YouTube channel. Down below, go down there, scroll down, you'll find links to what we're talking about.
Yeah, there's kind of a with the GATA portal, there's kind of an overall portal of all the state agencies and all of their grant opportunities. You have to dig in a little bit for each one, but it's not that complicated. It is in one nice location. So that would be the location where they would go to first even see if the nonprofit would be eligible for something.
Well, one of the things that I think was important, we've got 2 episodes here, 2 segments of a conversation with Mr. Joiner, where one was his business and part 2 was his not-for-profit corporation. One is for-profit for business, and he derives income from that. The other one, the not-for-profit, he emphasized it's not-for-profit, and even though there can be funding, and if there is sufficient funding, he can be hired by the board to deliver the services. It's essentially a service-oriented rather than profit-oriented entity. And because it receives tax benefit, there's a certain obligation to the public in terms of structure, accountability. There's even different accounting systems that are used for a business versus a not-for-profit. So we really appreciate this insight that you're providing to help people who get started out of the goodness of their heart and establishing a not-for-profit corporation, but then making it viable as a long-term proposition so that they can actually afford to invest themselves and their time into delivering the services to fulfill the mission that they set out for themselves at the beginning of this.
Mm-hmm. I think that the process of creating bylaws for a nonprofit is really eye-opening for a founder. I was just working with a nonprofit recently who thought that that one of their founders, you need at least 3 when you're setting up your bylaws to be on the board. And they thought that someone on the board could also be their first executive director. And so then that led to the conversation about how a board and an executive director, any type of board versus paid staff, it's more, Joan Gary is a great nonprofit expert, and she always says that they're co-pilots. The staffers and the board are co-pilots. The board, like you said when you were talking to Lynard, has that financial responsibility to make sure that the organization is sustainable and can fulfill its mission. And so there are just rules like that. You can't have someone who's being paid to fulfill the mission make the fiduciary decisions, the budgeting decisions, all that type of thing on their own as a board member as well. So and the other thing is that when you have a nonprofit, it's open to the world. Anyone can come in and look at your books. Anyone, can find you online through GuideStar or some other service. How you spend your money is public record when you're a nonprofit. That's what you've said. They're there for the public good. So it is very different. And Lynard is an interesting story in that he's done both, and there is a difference. But it's not going through the bylaws and learning about that type of thing is a really helpful process.
Well, let me also make a point. I've been involved in a number of not-for-profit organizations as a board member, and even helped create one of them. Now, let me just tell those of you who are listening that it is typical for not-for-profit organizations to go through a couple of cycles. First of all, there's the founder syndrome.
Right.
The founder syndrome is when you're the Lynard Joiner and you discover, wait, when I created this not-for-profit corporation, I'm no longer in complete control of...
I'm not making every single decision myself, right?
I'm not doing it. I'm delivering the services, but somebody else, a group of people is actually guiding the direction of the organization. So selecting who's going to be that initial group is important, people that share the same vision. But they also ultimately make decisions about whether to hire you, as if you're the founder, or if the founder is going to be delivering the services, going to be that executive director. Mm-hmm. They're going to make the decisions about that. Mm-hmm. That's very different than when you're a business and you're the sole owner of that. And it's scary for somebody. So that's one thing. You go through this founder syndrome where I've got to let go of the reins of the management side of the organization.
Well, and usually as the founder, you're also the one recruiting your first board member. So that is the awkward part. Like, well, I recruited you. I got you all excited about this mission, and now you're having a different opinion than I am. It is. But that is the beauty of nonprofit. I think the beauty of nonprofit work is the messiness between the board and the staff. It's a good messiness. You need all of those ideas to be fleshed out to really achieve the mission in the highest possible way.
And it's a collaborative effort. It's no longer you're the captain of your own ship. You're part of a crew that's running this ship when it's a not-for-profit. The second thing that happens is that the original board will sometimes get stale, and people end up leaving. They move, they get other commitments, things of this sort. And it's typical that the board has to be, and the organization sometimes has to be revived or revitalized. And it goes through a period of recreation in some ways. That may look at the bylaws and say, things have changed. We've learned some things. Maybe you got a different direction. And so don't get discouraged if you're going through this sort of thing. That's exactly what Mr. Joiner and Singh, and I'm on his board, that's what we're going through right now, reestablishing a working board. You notice that he said several times, working board.
Right.
You can start off with a board of directors, and they're just all excited to have their name associated with this good cause.
Right.
There's a difference between that and a working board.
If you're thinking of starting a nonprofit and you're thinking of your first board members, definitely have a straight up conversation with potential board members about what they're willing to do. And sometimes it does change based on what they've told you. It does change later, and you have to change with them. But there are definitely people who would like to put your nonprofit on their resume, but may not come to the table and do the work that you need. So you kind of have to have an eye out for that at all times. But I've been involved with nonprofits that are 5 years old, 25 years old, 50 years old. Sometimes board members get burnt out. Like you said, they move, other things happen. That is part of the churn of the board, and constantly attracting new people to the mission who could be helpful to the mission is an ongoing thing. If you end up being a paid staff person for the nonprofit you're founding, you're going to be it's going to be a constant process of interacting with those board members to keep them engaged. I mean, I was just told a story recently of a nonprofit that's about a little more than 25 years old. And of the 20 board members, 4 came to the last meeting. And that was devastating to the executive director. You have to have more participation than that. So then you have to think, well, what would get them more engaged? Maybe are these the right people anymore? There's just a lot of thoughts that you have. But when you're first starting your nonprofit, trying to attract the people that will be the working board. Advisory boards are a dime a dozen. When you're starting a nonprofit that is going to be on the ground doing work, you really want a working board.
You've brought up an important point, actually 2 important points. First, you mentioned advisory board. You can have a board of directors and a separate advisory board. And people can be on that advisory board who act as resources. The organization's not depending upon them to get the work done. They're turning to them as a resource for ideas, for suggestions, and including even suggestions as to members of the working board, the board of directors. The second thing is not-for-profit organizations go through a life cycle. And the founder syndrome applies to members of the board of directors. Those original board members need to be willing, just like the executive director who is creating, maybe the creator, the original founder, like Mr. Joiner of the organization, they need to be able to let go also and to recruit new blood, bring in new ideas, and keep the life cycle going. Because if you don't, well, the life cycle is of end of life.
Well,
cycle.
So that's another piece of advice about the bylaws. Bylaws usually have term limits in them for board members. And I know that can be really scary as a founder that, I can't let this person go after 6 years. Like, I'm going to need them forever. But really following your bylaws and following those term limits and working on the life cycle of a board member. A lot of boards have maybe 2 terms. A term is a period of time when they're working with you. So maybe a 3-year is 1 term. And then, so there might be 2 terms, which would be 6 years. And then they're supposed to roll off the board. And then you have processes in your bylaws about how to attract new people and how to bring them on. That is actually a really solid document as far as that. You do want to have that mindset that you're not going to start and end a 20-year cycle of a nonprofit with the same 20 people. You want new blood, like you said. The other thing, if you're thinking, well, what is an advisory board? How is that different than my board? A popular phrase for this type of group is kitchen cabinet. So think about it as the people that you would just invite over to your kitchen and you would just ask them their advice. So advisory board, kitchen cabinet, that might help people differentiate a little bit between, what the advisory board is versus the board. They're just people you go have lunch with and ask for advice.
Lisa, this is tremendously valuable. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Public Health Matters, Small Business Navigator Program, brought to you by the Illinois Public Health Association, with grant support from the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity.